I knew something was wrong the moment my porch light blinked twice and died, like it was trying to send me a warning in Morse code before giving up. After 3 weeks abroad, 2 suitcases, a duffel bag full of overpriced duty-free coffee, and a jet lag so dense it felt like someone had wrapped my brain in cotton and concrete, I wasn't in the mood for house drama. But that flicker? That was not random. That was a middle finger in LED. I climbed the steps of what was unmistakably my house. Same crooked tile, same cactus in the corner with the googly eyes my niece stuck on with hot glue, but when I slid my key into the lock it stopped halfway, like the house didn't recognize me. Not jammed. Replaced. I blinked. Then I checked the door handle. It was newer, shinier, like someone had remodeled the welcome mat right off my life. For a split second, I thought I'd walked up to the wrong house, but the dent in the gutter from the year I tried to hang Christmas lights while buzzed off eggnog said otherwise. This was my house. It just didn't want me anymore. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. If you're into wild, true feeling stories with justice, jaw drops, and just enough HOA madness to make your coffee shake, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story, even crazier, and the twists coming next, you won't want to blink. I tried the garage. Code rejected. Back gate, locked with a chain that looked fresh from Home Depot. I even double-checked the neighbor's mailbox to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from lack of REM sleep, but no, everything lined up, except for the part where I couldn't get in. Then it hit me like a cold slap of reality. Silence. No barking, no Kona. My golden retriever barked at clouds, butterflies, the Amazon driver's shadow. Silence meant either he wasn't in sight or something worse. That's when worry stopped knocking and let itself in. I called Mike, my neighbor, retired fire chief, amateur nosy Parker. He picked up on the third ring like he'd been waiting. "Jason? You back already?" Something about the way he said it made my stomach knot. "Yeah, and I can't get into my house. Locks are changed, no sign of Kona." He sighed, like someone just asked him to explain Facebook to his dad again. "You better come over," he said. "I got something to show you." So I left my bag sitting on the porch like abandoned luggage at a divorce hearing and walked across the street. Mike was already standing in his driveway with a tablet in hand, like a priest about to deliver a terrible confession. "Watch this," he said, tapping play. It was security footage, his camera pointed directly at my front yard, dated 6 days ago. A white van pulled up, and out stepped none other than Marla Densmore, HOA president, clipboard addict, and community tyrant-in-chief, alongside a locksmith. They didn't knock, didn't hesitate. They just marched up like they were reclaiming a summer home. Lock got drilled, deadbolt replaced, mailbox tagged with an orange slip that screamed violation in Comic Sans. "She said the house was abandoned," Mike explained. "Claimed emergency rights under Clause 8.3, something about prolonged neglect." "Neglect?" I snapped. "I was in Japan on business." "She told the board you hadn't responded to any notices," he said. "Claimed she had authority to enter." The video kept rolling. Marla waved to the camera. Actually waved? Before walking inside like she owned the place. Then, a flash of motion behind her, someone else. A teen, maybe 20, skating down my hallway like it was a half-pipe. "Her nephew?" Mike added. "Been staying there. She's been holding yoga classes in your living room." My jaw hit the floor. "And Kona?" I asked. Mike didn't meet my eyes. Think she gave him away, said he needed better interaction. I didn't even process it. I just marched straight across the street and pounded on my own front door like it owed me rent money. The door creaked open on a chain lock, and there she was, Marla, in a pink windbreaker with HOA stitched on the sleeve like it was a badge of honor, smiling like she'd just returned a casserole dish. "Jason! What a surprise," she said, sweet as antifreeze. "You changed the locks, moved in, and gave away my dog." She tutted like I'd forgotten to RSVP to brunch. "Let's not be dramatic. The house appeared vacant. I followed emergency procedures." Section 3.2 under our absentee clause. "I own this house," I interrupted. "There's no clause that lets you invade private property." I sent notices, she insisted. Certified. Emailed. We even left one on the door. I was overseas, I said. You knew that. You were at the meeting where I announced it. She blinked, then smiled wider. That's not the point. The point is we acted quickly to prevent community degradation. The only thing degrading around here was my blood pressure. I called the police. 2 patrol cars showed up. I laid it all out. Footage, dog records, proof of travel. I squinted at her papers, stamped with a seal that looked like it came free with clip art, and after 15 minutes of hemming and hawing declared it a civil dispute. Translation, not our job. Marla waved as they left, then gently closed the door. On me. I checked into the nearest motel, the kind with lobby coffee that tastes like burnt dust and regrets, and sat on a scratchy floral bedspread, wondering if I'd been evicted from my own reality. A year ago, after a break-in scare, I'd installed a cloud-based security system. I fired up the app, logged in, and what I saw nearly made me throw the laptop. Marla was in my living room, leading 5 women through yoga poses. Sun salutations where my grandmother's piano used to sit. Her nephew skated through the hall, knocking a vase off the side table. The kicker? Someone was listing my vintage record collection on a resale app under the username HOA Queen Reclaimed. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't miscommunication. This was a hostile takeover dressed in HOA bylaws and pink polyester. And if Marla thought I was just going to roll over while she turned my life into her weekend spa retreat, she clearly didn't know the kind of man who installs 4 layers of cloud backup just for fun. She could have the clipboard. I had the receipts. And I was about to take my house back. First real clue that something was way more wrong than I'd imagined came from my power bill. I wasn't even home, but my electric usage had tripled. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Maybe the motel coffee had fried my brain and I was reading the decimal in the wrong place. But no. According to the smart meter app, my house had pulled enough voltage in 5 days to power a diner and a laundromat during prom season. The thermostat was off. Lights unplugged. Kona wasn't even around to bump the TV remote with his tail, so unless the house had grown a personality and a side hustle while I was in Tokyo, something was leaching power. And when I saw that spike came from the garage circuit, the one that used to hold my woodworking tools and a backup server, I knew this wasn't some innocent accident. Someone wasn't just living in my house. They were building something in it. And suddenly, I didn't want to blink until I figured out what. I pulled up the security feed again, scrolling past clips of Marla doing yoga in leggings loud enough to cause static and her nephew juggling grapefruit in my kitchen. But then I hit the garage cam and froze. My workbench, the one I'd built with my father's old tools, had been cleared. In its place, a steel rack with blinking server lights, cables running like vines across the wall, and a flat screen mounted up top playing a feed labeled HOA Command Center. My garage had been turned into some kind of suburban surveillance war room, and I, apparently, was footing the bill. It wasn't just disrespect. It was strategy. It was power rerouted in the most literal way. If Karen was the queen, I had unknowingly become the castle's power generator. She didn't just take over my house. She tapped its veins and fed her empire. You ever feel your blood pressure rise and your sense of humor drop at the same time? That was me, but I knew right then, she may have invaded, but she hadn't won. Not yet. I walked straight to Mike's house and threw the energy logs on his porch table like I was dropping evidence in a courtroom. He looked over the numbers, whistled low, and said, "Looks like they're launching satellites in your garage." He wasn't kidding. I'd seen startup incubators with less wiring. Mike leaned back in his lawn chair, the kind that creaked when he got serious. She had that whole booth built in 3 days. Said it was an emergency upgrade. No permit, no vote, just slapped it together and said it was authorized under Infrastructure Acceleration Clause. I squinted. "That's not a thing." He nodded. "That's what I said." She taped a sticky note inside the HOA handbook and called it policy. My jaw clenched so tight my molars tried to fuse. This isn't an HOA anymore. It's a kingdom with a pink windbreaker. Mike chuckled. But it wasn't funny. It was frightening. Karen wasn't just abusing the rules, she was inventing them in real time. And I realized I wasn't paranoid. I was behind schedule. I drove straight to City Hall the next morning, half tempted to tape the energy bill to the mayor's forehead. I spent 5 hours buried in zoning codes, permit logs, and a filing clerk named Ruth who had a memory like an elephant with a grudge. What I found was delicious. Marla's command center had no permit. No inspection, no electrical review, nothing. She hadn't even listed it on the HOA's quarterly budget. She just built it and plugged it straight into my power box like I was her utilities sponsor. And the worst part? That line had been buried illegally across property lines, hidden under the sod near my shed. It was literally siphoning energy off my life like a parasite in khakis. I wasn't dealing with a bad neighbor. I was dealing with a bureaucratic vampire. And somewhere between the coffee-stained zoning maps and Ruth's third reminder to not scratch the laminate, found the leverage I needed. She'd built an illegal structure. She'd bypassed utilities. She had crossed a line, literally and legally, and that meant one thing: it was time to fight back. Back at the motel, I opened every file I had and built a digital war chest. Power logs, footage, zoning maps, fake bylaws, fake notices, anything that proved Marla's castle was made of copy-pasted nonsense and entitlement. And in the middle of it all, I found a picture I didn't even realize the camera had taken. A still of Karen's nephew skateboarding past the security rack, holding a smoothie with a straw shaped like a flamingo. I stared at it longer than I should have, because that image, blinking lights, smug teenager, HOA war room in my garage, wasn't just absurd, it was offensive. It was a reminder that they thought I was powerless, that while I was out there building something of value, they were in here staging a coup with power cords and yoga mats. But if Marla thought she could take my home, my dog, and now my power, and I'd just sit quietly? She clearly hadn't read the part of my biography where I turn polite into paperwork, and paperwork into justice. If you thought stealing someone's power was bold, wait till you see what happens when I bring in something louder than bylaws. A bulldozer. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part of this ha-ho horror show, because, trust me, the fence she builds next, let's just say it doesn't end well for her. I didn't need therapy, I needed a lawyer with teeth. Enter Tanya Liu, my secret weapon wrapped in red lipstick and a southern drawl sharp enough to file paperwork on command. Tanya didn't waste time on pleasantries. She showed up at the motel with a notepad, a laptop, and a stare that made me feel like I owed her something just for wasting her time. After 15 minutes reviewing the footage and power logs, she closed the laptop slowly, like she was sealing a coffin, and said, "Honey, this woman's been confusing HOA with hostile occupation." That was the moment the mood changed, from violated homeowner to plaintiff with purpose. Because when Tanya got involved, things didn't just escalate, they detonate, and I could already smell the smoke. Our first stop was the city inspector's office. I didn't expect much, maybe a shrug, maybe another "it's a civil matter" dance. But once the inspector, a no-nonsense guy named Kurt with a laser-level stare, rolled his detection rig across my property and followed the buried wire to the HOA bunker, he stopped cold. No conduit, no shielding, no permit. She wired a surveillance compound into your house like it was a Christmas display. He muttered. He flagged it as a code violation on the spot, a felony-level offense, fire hazard, theft of service, and my favorite phrase, grounds for immediate enforcement. For the first time since I landed from Tokyo, the law leaned in my direction, and it felt good. Not just because it meant I was right, but because Karen was officially, gloriously wrong, and wrong in writing. Tanya didn't stop there. She sent a private investigator digging into the HOA's finances. And let me tell you, what we found wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping, it was practically a treasure map of corruption. Multiple payouts listed under community enrichment, one for a home gym, one for a wellness retreat, and one suspiciously labeled educational grant, which turned out to be her nephew's freshman tuition at a college in Arizona. But the real gem? A name I hadn't heard in a while. Claire Brantley, Marla's former assistant, vanished 2 months ago under the vague excuse of mental health leave. Except Claire hadn't disappeared entirely. The investigator found a trail of logged emails and budget drafts all tied to her, and when I mentioned that Marla had once said Claire wasn't fit for leadership, Tanya raised an eyebrow like she'd just smelled blood in the water. Something told me Claire knew more than she was supposed to, and that meant she might have left breadcrumbs. I went home that night. The motel felt too cramped for plotting, and started looking, not for keys, for leverage. And I found it in the attic, tucked behind a duct like it was hiding from the world, a black lockbox. Inside was a USB stick, a thick binder labeled HOA Finance Revised, and a stack of photos. One showed Marla handing a check to a contractor dated a full week before the board had voted to approve that job. Another caught her walking out of a neighbor's house alone, when that neighbor had been on vacation. There were forged signatures, duplicate invoices, and a set of expense reports that looked like they were written by a raccoon on Red Bull. Claire hadn't resigned. She'd gone rogue. And she'd left this as insurance. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but from the sheer electric rush of justice on the horizon. Marla hadn't just broken the rules. She'd turned the handbook into a napkin and scrawled her name in permanent marker. And now, I had the eraser. The next morning, Tanya filed an injunction citing unlawful entry, theft of utilities, and code violations tied to the buried wire. But Marla? She didn't back down. No, she built a fence, an 8-foot-tall monstrosity with a keypad gate, aluminum spikes, and a security camera perched like a gargoyle watching my driveway. She wrapped it around my entire lot like a fortress of middle-class intimidation. No notice, no vote, just dropped it in overnight, like a dictator planting a flag. Mike texted me at 7 a.m. with a photo and one sentence: "She's gone medieval." I stood at the edge of my sidewalk staring up at it, and for a second, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd it looped back into comedy. Marla had turned my house into a prison and herself into the warden. But what she didn't know was this: she wasn't the only one with friends in construction, and she definitely underestimated how far I was willing to go to take back what was mine. She built herself a castle, but she forgot I still had the keys to the drawbridge and a demolition guy named Dozer. There's something deeply surreal about ordering a bulldozer like it's takeout. You call a number, give a few details, and the guy on the other end goes, "You want Caterpillar or Komatsu?" I said, "Caterpillar." Felt right. Poetic justice with claws. The man I called owed me a favor. His name's Darnell Booker, but everybody calls him Blade. Ex-Navy demolition expert, now runs a civilian teardown business with more firepower than most small countries. I met him years ago at a veterans home repair program. He once took down a 2-story meth house with one hand on the lever and a burrito in the other. When I explained what Marla had done, he didn't even blink. Your HOA wired themselves into your power grid and built a fence around your house without a permit? Exactly. And you've got permits to remove it, stamped and sealed. He chuckled low. "I'm bringing the big bucket." At that moment I knew this wasn't just going to be legal, it was going to be biblical. The next morning at exactly 5:02 IEM, Blade pulled up with the rig on a trailer the size of a studio apartment. His son Troy rode shotgun, sipping coffee from a thermos the size of a cannon shell. We parked at the edge of the cul-de-sac, and I climbed onto the Caterpillar like I'd been waiting my whole life to sit in that seat. The neighbors were already stirring. Mike brought his folding chair and a lawn blanket like it was a holiday parade. Rich passed around coffee. One of the Henderson kids held up a cardboard sign that said "Free Eli" written in red Sharpie. It felt less like a demolition and more like a block party where vengeance was on the menu. And then, right on cue, Marla stormed out of the HOA office in a silk robe, slippers, and enough hair curlers to block a satellite signal. She looked like a suburban general waking up mid-invasion. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed. I revved the engine, removing an unpermitted structure under City Ordinance 14.7C. You built this fence illegally, on my property, using my stolen power, with HOA funds that were never authorized, and guess what? I've got a signed demolition waiver and a city inspector on speed dial." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Then she scurried back inside and emerged seconds later with a megaphone. "This is harassment! This is destruction of community assets! I'm calling the sheriff!" I smiled. "Go ahead." He signed the permit. And with that, I dropped the blade. The first crack of wood splitting under steel sounded like liberation. The fence didn't fall, it surrendered. Solar lights blinked once, then toppled like plastic dominoes. The keephead gate twisted sideways with a whimper as I rolled through it like it owed me money. The crowd started clapping. Even the mailman stopped his truck to watch. Justice doesn't always knock. Sometimes it drives a caterpillar through your bad ideas. By the time I made it to the garage side, Blade was already at work with a backhoe pulling up the foundation. Marla screamed something unintelligible about insurance, liability, and the sacred duty of HOA leadership, but no one listened. Every splintered board was a symbol, every shattered panel a reminder that no amount of pink polyester or laminated nonsense could stand up to due process and diesel. When we reached the corner where the buried wire entered my property, Troy hopped off the rig, unspooled it by hand, and placed the entire coil into a plastic tote labeled Exhibit A. We drove it straight to the city inspector's office. Kurt met us in the parking lot, took one look at the jerry-rigged cable, and said, "This could have burned down the block." We handed it over with a receipt. It was no longer evidence. It was closure. But the final surprise came later, when I walked the perimeter and found something scratched on the inside of one of the fence planks. Small, rushed, but clear. "Help me." I called Mike over. He stared at it a moment, then frowned. "That's Claire's handwriting. Claire Brantley, Marla's assistant. The one who resigned for health reasons and vanished before the financial scandal started to unravel. The woman who, it turns out, may not have left willingly." We stood there in silence, the sun rising behind the broken fence, casting long shadows across the dirt. It hit me then. This wasn't just about me or my house. This was about every quiet voice Marla had drowned with policies no one voted for and power grabs nobody challenged. Claire had left breadcrumbs, a message hidden in wood, under siege. And now, with the walls finally down and the light coming in, I knew exactly what had to happen next. The demolition was done, but the real story, that was just beginning. I didn't expect much from the USB drive. Maybe a few spreadsheets, maybe a resignation letter, maybe some passive-aggressive HOA memos with too many commas. But what I found when I plugged it in was something else entirely. The first video file was grainy, shot from a low angle in what looked like the HOA office. Marla stood with her arms folded like a mob boss in khakis. Across from her, Claire Brantley sat stiff like a kid in the principal's office with no backup. "Do what I say," Marla hissed, "or lose your house. Simple." That one sentence flipped everything. This wasn't just manipulation. This was blackmail. Not policy, not procedure. This was a hostile regime, wearing a name tag and sipping community coffee. Claire hadn't quit. She'd been squeezed out, like so many others, by a woman who used HOA bylaws like brass knuckles. And now, finally, the mask had cracked. I sent the footage to Tanya, who responded in all caps, "Get dressed, we're taking this to the state." By noon, she'd filed formal documents for a forensic audit of the HOA finances and pushed the video to the state attorney general's office. She said, "Marla's in deep misuse of funds, coercion, property fraud. This is the kind of thing they make docu-series about." I laughed, but there was no real humor left in it, just adrenaline and purpose. Meanwhile, the news caught wind. A local station showed up with a reporter wearing a blazer 2 sizes too tight and a camera crew that looked 60% confused, 40% excited. And wouldn't you know it, Marla was ready. She greeted them in front of the HOA office with a prepared statement about restoration, healing, and misunderstood policies. The audacity was Olympic level. She tried to spin everything, claimed the fence was a symbol of unity, the server rack was community infrastructure, and that she had always acted in the spirit of cohesion. I almost gagged. So I pulled out my phone, mid-interview, no warning, just clicked open the video of Marla threatening Claire and held it up like a magic trick no one wanted to see. The reporter blinked, the cameraman zoomed, and Marla froze. Her face didn't fall. It collapsed, the way a soufflé does when someone slams a door in the next room. The crew asked for a copy. I handed them the USB like I was dealing a card in poker. "Play clip 3, I told them. "She admits to falsifying signatures in that one." Marla didn't wait for round 2. She walked off mid-take, her statement papers fluttering behind her like defeated flags. And just like that, the air changed. Neighbors came out of their houses. Some nodded, some clapped. One guy across the street whispered, "About damn time." After months of madness, the story flipped. Truth had entered the chat. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Jason?" The voice was soft, unsure. "It's Claire." I nearly dropped the phone. "I saw the footage," she said. You actually found it?" Her voice cracked. "I left it in the attic because I didn't know who to trust. I wasn't even sure anyone would ever find it." I told her she saved herself. I just held the flashlight. She paused. "Be careful. Marla doesn't lose well. And she doesn't act alone." That stuck with me longer than I wanted to admit, because Marla didn't just have control. She had allies, contractors, ex-board members, people who liked power more than principle. But still. This time, the current had turned. The board met 2 days later in an emergency session and voted to reinstate the original charter. They nullified every Marla-made clause, elected a temporary committee, and asked me, the guy who once got fined for painting his mailbox too blue, to co-chair the reform. I said I'd think about it. After all, I still had a garage to detox and a soul to uncringe. But just as things felt stable for the first time in months, Rich knocked on my door holding a plain manila envelope. "Found this under my porch swing," he said, "no return address." Inside were printed screenshots of private texts, messages I'd sent neighbors venting about Marla, joking about her dictator cosplay, even one where I called the HOA a glorified cult with landscaping. It wasn't damning. Embarrassing, juvenile, and at the bottom of the packet, a note made of magazine clippings glued ransom style. "You just made her mad." I burned the envelope, didn't even hesitate. But I didn't sleep that night either. Because while Marla was gone from the office, from the board, maybe even from the neighborhood, one thing was clear. She wasn't done. And the next part? It wasn't going to come through paperwork. It was going to come quietly, and I'd have to be ready. I was brushing my teeth when the bathroom light flickered, twice, and died, just like the porch light that started it all. At first, I thought maybe the breaker had tripped, maybe I had a faulty wire, just maybe the universe had a flair for callbacks. But then the fridge went silent, the ceiling fan wheezed to a stop, and the entire house sat in still, mocking darkness. I walked out to the breaker box, only to find the lock snapped off, the screws lying in the grass like discarded confetti. Every switch had been flipped manually. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. Someone had come back. Not to steal, not to squat, but to rattle the cage. And suddenly the quiet of my now safe neighborhood felt like the hush before a thunderclap. It got weirder. I checked my rear camera feed and caught a small figure, short, hood up, ducking behind my HVAC unit. Later that day I found it. A mess of wires duct-taped to a blinking LED light and a Bluetooth speaker that played a slow, rhythmic ticking. It wasn't a bomb, but it sure looked like one if you were half awake and running on coffee fumes. The cops came, took photos, and quickly identified the handiwork. Karen's nephew, the same teenage menace who once skated down my hallway like it was his personal X Games event. This time, he'd tried to plant psychological warfare using an Amazon speaker and some dollar store drama. It was theater. But it worked. It didn't scare me physically, but mentally, it brought the war right back to my doorstep. Because if someone's willing to fake a bomb, they're not just poking the bear. They're not just poking the bear, daring it to wake up. Then came the fake foreclosure notice. It showed up in my mailbox 3 days later, complete with a forged HOA letterhead and a claim that my property was being seized for chronic community disruption. What gave it away wasn't the claim, it was the typo in foreclosure. Tanya traced the print signature back to a cheap office printer registered in a co-working space 3 towns over, the same one Karen had used to file her bogus solar company. Tanya had seen enough. She submitted everything to the district court: the fake foreclosure, the sabotage attempt, the buried power line, the videos of blackmail. And then, sweet poetic timing, Karen Whitmore was arrested in a Whole Foods parking lot, arguing with a clerk over expired truffle butter. 2 plainclothes officers flanked her like the punchline to a joke she didn't write. She claimed civic immunity and insisted she was a registered neighborhood sovereign. The officers responded with handcuffs and zero enthusiasm. Just like that, the HOA queen had fallen over cheese. The fallout was glorious. The court froze all HOA assets. Forensic accountants traced over $83,000, 0 cents of community funds to unauthorized purchases. Home gym equipment, spa treatments, a personalized bobblehead labeled Madam President. I'm not kidding, the HOA board, now under state receivership, was rebuilt from scratch. Claire was voted chairwoman. She accepted with one condition: I had to co-chair with her. I reluctantly agreed, not because I craved leadership, but because after what we'd all survived, the least I could do was help dig out the rot with someone who nearly lost everything trying to stop it. 2 months later, we hosted a block cookout. A new fence, 4 feet high, white picket, modest, wrapped around my yard. No keypads, no barbed wire. Just kids laughing, burgers sizzling, and neighbors smiling again. For the first time since that porch light blinked out, I felt home. And then the girl with the bubble wand pointed. "Where's that lady hiding in the bushes?" she asked, squinting toward the hedges near the sidewalk. We all turned. There she was. Sunglasses, hoodie, scarf pulled tight like she was in witness protection from her own legacy. It was Marla, watching, lurking. When she realized we'd spotted her, she bolted like a sitcom villain mid-symmetrical break. 3 teens grabbed water balloons and chased her down the block with a drone overhead, capturing everything in glorious 1080p. She hasn't been back since, but just to be safe, I installed one final detail near the mailbox. A wooden sign, hand-carved, painted bright. It reads, "Private property. Trespassers will be filmed, memed, and exposed on Reddit." And below that, smaller font, "Ask me about the lawnmower." Because when people walk past my house now, they don't see a war zone. They see a monument to survival, a house that fought back. And they remember, you don't mess with a man who outlasted an HOA coup with paperwork, patience, and a bulldozer. So here I am, months later, standing in my yard, coffee in hand, watching sunlight bounce off a fence I chose, in a house I reclaimed, on land I fought for. And when folks ask me what really happened here, I don't say drama with the HOA. I say it was a lesson in boundaries, literal and personal. Because when someone tries to steal your peace, your power, and your voice, the only way to get it back is to stand your ground, with humor, with truth, with receipts. And, yeah, sometimes, with a bulldozer. Marla didn't just represent an HOA gone rogue. She was a warning of what happens when small power goes unchecked. But more importantly, Claire reminded us that even the quietest people can hold the loudest truths, that a single voice hidden in an attic can crack a regime wide open, and that when neighbors stop whispering and start standing up together, things change. The bylaws get rewritten, the good people take the mic back. And the bad ones? They get chased off by teenagers with water balloons and drone footage. If this story gave you chills, made you laugh, or just reminded you that justice still has a pulse, that's the point. You deserve to feel powerful in your own space. You deserve leaders who serve, not hoard. And most of all, you deserve to know, even if someone hijacks your house, your neighborhood, your dignity, it's not over. Not if you're willing to fight smarter, not just louder. So hey, if you found value in this wild ride, do me a favor. Leave a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from, or share your own Marla story. We know she's got cousins in every zip code. Hit that like button if you believe neighbors should defend each other, not fence each other out. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story, let's just say it involves a rogue HOA treasurer, a suspicious koi pond, and a retired IRS agent with a chainsaw. Because around here, we don't just tell stories, we take back the narrative, one fence post at a time.